At the beginning, I picked up a crimson and became a life and death enemy with Iron Man. It seems that this art style is a bit off. Fortunately, it comes with a golden finger, but it seems that this system is also somewhat abnormal. I want to be a good person, why is the whole world pressuring me? Marvel World Single Player Unlimited Flow. Group number 3628570009. Keywords of the novel. Marvel's movie, The Great Destruction, without a pop-up window. Download the full text of Marvel's movie, The Great Destruction, and read the latest chapter of Marvel's movie, The Great Destruction. Chapter 1. Opening Sacrifice to Heaven. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Opening Sacrifice to Heaven, Boom. Feeling the continuous sound of explosions coming from outside, Li Qingyuan turned his head to look at the inexplicable mosaics beside him. He felt waves of brain pain. Who can tell him why it was a bomb that woke him up, not firecrackers? He was still struggling with how to face the urging of his 7 aunts and 8 aunts to get married, but now he finally breathes a sigh of relief. As a middle-aged and elderly man who is close to 40 and has not yet married, every family gathering during the Chinese New Year is like a criticism meeting. Yesterday he was still worried about how to face today's family criticism meeting, but now it's okay, there's no need to worry at all. What he needs to worry about now is how to survive. It's too childish to just take a nap at home and then travel directly. For others, they may hesitate for a while when encountering this kind of thing, but for Li Qingyuan, who was a street-fighting novelist in his past life, isn't it a normal basic operation to travel through this kind of thing? That's right, he was a dead-end writer of novels before he traveled through time, because his writing style was rubbish, his values were not correct, his innovation was insufficient, and he had no imagination, resulting in no readers at all. If it weren't for his part-time job as a security guard, it would probably be difficult to even solve his survival problems. Just now, Li Qingyuan looked around and felt like he was about to kneel down. He is currently in the living room on the 2nd floor. Just now, the predecessor of this body was preparing dinner with his parents, but a missile flew from somewhere and fell directly from the ceiling, then exploded with a loud bang. According to reason, if he gets hit by a missile at close range, unless he has a superhuman physique, he is definitely doomed. However, it is obvious that the time-traveling god does not make sense at all. Even though the parents of this body and the 2 unlucky people brought down by the missile have all become indescribable mosaics, his body is still unscathed, not even a piece of oily skin has been broken. Of course, it's not completely unscathed, after all, this soul has been replaced. I patted my cheek and retrieved my memories from the remaining fragments of my soul. The unlucky child who was crossed by himself is called Jack Ma, who is 18 years old and is of Chinese descent, born in the small Eastern European country of Sokovia. Damn it. Upon learning about his situation from the fragments of his memory, Li Qingyuan couldn't help but curse. Jack Ma's parents were native flower growers, but 3 months before his birth, his parents sold 5 sets of quadrangle houses inherited from the imperial capital and came to Sokovia to make a living. Okay. This story can make everyone laugh and cry, but considering the social environment at that time, this suffocating operation did happen quite a bit. Fortunately, Jack Ma's parents did something suffocating, but the 2 of them were quite hardworking. For more than a decade, they worked hard in Sokovia and finally owned a building in Sokovia thanks to the love of the family's children for real estate. That's right, you read it right. Crossing comes with a building, and Jack Ma is also a 2nd generation building in Sokovia. Just now, listening to the constant sound of bombing in his ears, it is estimated that his 2nd generation in this building has come to an end. Shaking his head and putting aside his dream of building a 2nd generation, he now needs to consider how he can survive. The gunshots and bombings outside were in chaos. Although I don't know what exactly happened, I could tell with my toes that something really happened. Even missiles can fly into one's own living room, and one can imagine what kind of chaos is going on outside. Just staying in place is definitely not a good idea. Because there is still a missile inserted above my head. This 6-story apartment building is the asset of his former parents. The first floor is a restaurant, the second floor is for his family to live in, and all 3 floors and above are rented out. The missile just now seemed to have flown in from the window on the 3rd floor, directly penetrating the floor and ceiling on the 2nd floor, and then exploded in his living room. And now the missile inserted above the head, about 1 meter long, happens to be diagonally inserted into the floor of the 3rd floor, tilting at a strange angle. Missiles can be detonated at any time, even if they don't detonate. If they fall from the 3rd floor, they are likely to explode with a bang. So his current priority is to quickly escape from this dangerous building and find a safe place to hide. Although it's not safe outside now, at least it's much stronger than having a missile on your head. Just as he was about to run away, he suddenly realized that the missile was printed with the Stark logo. Stark Group. Li Qingyuan's mind was buzzing wildly. Just now, when he found out that his country was Sokovia, he had no idea at all. After all, there were many small countries in Eastern Europe, and unless it was a bricklayer who was proficient in world geography, no one dared to say that he could remember the names of all countries. But with Sokovia and Stark Group, if he can't remember, he really feels guilty about his reputation as a street writer. Unexpectedly, I wandered through Marvel in a daze. Moreover, what's even more frustrating is that when others cross Marvel, they start directly in New York. The new village chief is either Phil Coulson or Little Spider, or Iron Man or Kim Jong. But what about myself? Surprisingly, it started with a missile developed by Stark Group. Is this gap too big? And if I remember correctly, it seems that the parents of this body were sent directly to the sky by a missile developed by Stark Group just now, right? Strictly speaking, isn't Iron Man his own enemy who killed his father and mother? Woo-woo. Woo-woo. Just as he was wandering beyond the sky, he heard bursts of crying in the gap between the explosions. Are there still living people? Li Qingyuan looked up and couldn't see the scene on the 3rd floor because his gaze was blocked, but it was obvious that the crying came from the 3rd floor. But he doesn't have any plans to save people right now. Who knows when that missile will explode, so he'd better run away quickly. He didn't want to go through it again just because he was a good person. This is Marvel World, a place where bosses run around and aliens go crazy. With his small arms and legs, he cannot bear the title of a hero. Besides, with his personality, it's really difficult for him to be a hero. The door has been destroyed by the aftermath of the explosion, but fortunately, it's only the 2nd floor here. Jumping down and supporting it is just a sprain, so there's no problem. Just as he was about to walk to the window, his footsteps suddenly turned back. It seems so. In my memory, the couple upstairs who rented their own house had a somewhat peculiar surname. What's your name, Maximoff? End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Picking up a Crimson Witch. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Picking up a Crimson Witch. Wanda Maximoff. Li Qingyuan obtained the name of the youngest daughter from the family upstairs from the remaining fragments of memory. In Avengers 2. Age of Creation, Scarlet is the sister of Fast Silver. The movie is set like this, so don't be a fan of manga. The couple upstairs have a pair of twin children, and the youngest daughter is called Wanda. As for the twin son, what is his name? Sorry, he forgot. Glancing at the calendar hanging on the wall, in 2007. Combined with the memories in my mind, the one crying upstairs should be the Crimson Witch in a little lowly state. There's no way, it's not easy to be a street-thumping writer these days. He watched movies back and forth countless times to write about Marvel, and he can be said to have memorized Wanda's background. Of course, he absolutely does not admit that it was because of the greatness of Crimson that he carefully observed it. Marvel was founded in 1939, and apart from Stan Lee, who has always been a hidden boss, everyone from the chairman to the cleaner has been replaced by several generations. Due to gear shifting, Marvel's worldview on the universe has been overturned and updated countless times. After all, 10,000 writers have 100,000 different ways of writing, and the worldview of the previous design will definitely not be fully accepted by the next one. Anyway, Marvel Universe is designed for eating books. The character of Scarlet Witch, also known as Wanda Maximoff, has been changed several times. Coupled with the messy copyright issues, it can be said that even Stan Lee himself cannot be sure what version he has traveled to. If the place named Sokovia is added to Wanda, who is only 10 years old this year, it can basically be determined that he is currently in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Thinking of this, Lee Ching-yuen slightly slowed down his mood. Although the Marvel Cinematic Universe is also full of crises, it is much safer compared to those irrational comic universes. At the very least, there won't be anyone in this world who can break through the fourth wall. Is it Wanda? Thinking of this, he immediately spoke up and shouted at the large hole on the roof. There's no way, the gunshots outside are ringing again. If you don't shout loudly, you probably won't be able to hear them at all. Woo-woo. Woo-woo. It was obvious that the little loli, who was in a state of mental breakdown, did not hear his shout at all, but continued to hold her head and cry bitterly. Brother Jack. Are you still alive? However, although Wanda didn't respond, another little ghost did. Damn it, what does it mean that I'm not dead yet? This little devil really can't speak. Lee Ching-yuen felt a crow fly past his forehead. No wonder this guy was written to death after only appearing in one movie. With this broken mouth, being able to survive for 3 minutes is already considered a face for the screenwriter. Petro Maximoff, Wanda's twin brother, was also a later member of Fast Silver. Kwai-yin's ability is to move at an extremely high speed, which is said to be on par with a neighboring red-clad child. Originally, this guy could also be considered a general of the Women's Federation, but it seems that because his special effects cost too much money, he was directly written to death. Tell a joke, Fast Silver with a speed exceeding the speed of light was actually killed by a machine gun. Okay, anyway, due to funding issues, even Gu-yi could fall downstairs and die. It's not a joke that Kwai-yin was killed by a machine gun. The Maximoff family has been renting this building for several years, so the twins and Lee Ching-yuen's predecessor are also considered acquaintances. Of course, they are just acquaintances who nod their heads. After all, the age difference between the two is 7 or 8 years, and Jack Ma in the past was not interested in playing with the two little kids. Jack, are my parents okay? Before he could reply, Petro shouted loudly from above. Originally, when he saw his parents being bombed downstairs by a missile, Petro had already put an end to it in his heart. However, now he heard voices coming from upstairs, which filled his young heart with hope. Since the landlord's foolish son is fine, maybe his parents are also fine. Well, your parents' condition is not good. Lee Ching-yuen looked at the pile of mosaics in silence. Probably even if Wolverine changed into this appearance, it would be very difficult to resurrect. Woo-woo. Woo-woo. Okay, Petro, who was still struggling in front of his sister, started to burst into tears. Lee Ching-yuen walked to the bottom of the hole, measured the height of the room, and considered how he could climb up. He doesn't have any thoughts about the future crimson of Wanda. After all, he's only a 10-year-old child, and he doesn't dare to take the risk of being scratched by the river crab god. The reason why I want to find the Wanda siblings is mainly because according to the plot in the movie, it seems that the two children are in a position where they can safely survive this war. It's chaotic outside now, and he dare not rush out to seek death. Although there was indeed a missile lying horizontally on the 3rd floor, as someone familiar with the plot, he knew that the missile was simply a squib. Lee Ching-yuen took out a chair from the corner of the room and set it on the ruins. He reached out and reached for the floor on the 3rd floor. Thanks to his predecessor's constant physical exercise, coupled with his youthful physique at the age of 18, even if he had reached the floor, he would not have been able to climb up with his pre-crossing physical fitness. After putting in a lot of effort, I finally climbed to the 3rd floor and followed the sound of crying to see the twins hiding under the table. By the way, what's the use of you two hiding under the table? Do you think a wooden table can withstand the shock wave of a missile? This is not an anti-Japanese drama. Brother Jack. Petro shouted at him with red eyes. Although they didn't get to know each other very well before, at least they were still acquaintances. A 10-year-old child suddenly lost his parents and had to pretend to be a man in front of his sister. Now that they finally met an acquaintance, Petro couldn't help it. After all, no matter what, he is just a 10-year-old child. It's okay, don't be afraid, you two come out first now. Li Qingyuan tried to show a friendly smile as he moved the broken bricks and stones blocking the table. He reached out and grabbed the wrists of the twin siblings, dragging them out directly from under the table. Woo-woo. Wanda continued to squat on the ground, sobbing incessantly. Although Petro spoke better, he also appeared somewhat disoriented. You can't expect a 10-year-old child to remain calm and composed in the current situation. Besides, if these two guys are really so calm, then Li Qingyuan will doubt whether they are just like himself, also crossing over. The host has come into contact with the world node character Wanda Maximoff and is eligible for teleportation. The first teleportation will begin in 10 minutes. Just as he was considering how to comfort these two children not to cry, a mechanical sound suddenly came to mind. Okay, my golden finger has finally been credited. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Let's have a discussion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Let's have a discussion. If you don't bring a golden finger during your travels these days, you won't be able to go out and greet people. Not to mention the dangerous and explosive world of Marvel Universe, if the protagonist doesn't bring his golden finger, he is basically here to deliver food. Who in the dark will send him over? The great existence will definitely not be idle and want to see his 10,000 different ways of dying. System, what is the first world? What is my task? It only took Li Qingyuan 3 seconds to accept the settings of his own system. After all, he can even accept things like crossing Marvel immediately. Isn't it natural for him to have a delivery system? The countdown begins, and the first world is Godzilla 2. Monster King. The mission will be released after the host's time travel arrives, and the host still has 9 minutes and 40 seconds to prepare. The cold mechanical sound of the system immediately replied. It was obvious that this was an emotionless system. Damn it. Even though he could directly communicate with the system in his mind, Li Qingyuan couldn't help but curse. Do you think the old version of Godzilla is enough? The latest version of Godzilla 2. Monster King. Monsters roam everywhere, growing mushrooms all over the world. I can't bear nuclear radiation even if I send my small body to do missions. This Nima is not meant to be played by a mentally disabled system, is it? Wanda and Pete Roden, who were crying, stopped crying. Both children raised their heads and looked at Li Qingyuan, who suddenly started cursing, with a mixture of fear and doubt in their eyes. It's nothing. I'm just a little annoyed. Seeing that his actions had frightened the two children, Li Qingyuan could only show a bitter smile and then reached out to rub their heads. System, can I change tasks? I'm a newcomer, isn't it too exaggerated to directly teleport this plot? Although Li Qingyuan knew that his request was completely useless, he felt that he should still try to fight for it a bit. Maybe this mentally disabled system suddenly crashes. We are analyzing the host's capabilities, and based on testing that the host's attributes are slightly lower than those of ordinary people, the survival rate of teleporting Godzilla 2. Monster King is 0.00000001 per thousand. We have started changing the storyline world and are now changing it to Titanic. Yeah. Excited, Li Qingyuan immediately picked up Xiaowengda in his arms and performed a triple lift. It's good if an ordinary person suddenly doesn't go crazy under the stimulation of time travel and system stimulation. Those who argue with me may even win the first prize in the lottery, and just take it easy. Don't argue with me about being calm and composed. Wanda looked at the suddenly insane big brother with bewildered eyes, unable to understand his actions. Petro quickly pulled his sister away and looked at the dancing guy with a hint of caution. Isn't this guy stupid? Titanic. Li Qingyuan looked at the first virtual storyline world that appeared before his eyes and felt that he had stabilized. Titanic is a romantic film adapted by James Cameron based on historical events. It swept the entire film and television industry as soon as it was first released, and even won awards with ease. The whole movie was not very dangerous from beginning to end, and there were only some minor troubles when the ship sank in the end. But for him, who is familiar with the entire plot of the movie, can a little trouble be considered trouble? To travel through Titanic, the mission should be to save people or obtain the heart of the sea, or to be slightly evil, and to deceive the female protagonist Ruth. Although Kate Livingston later gained a nickname for being fat and warm because she released herself, she was still in her prime when filming Titanic. If she really had a mission, then she wouldn't be at a disadvantage. You two wait here first, I'll go to the restroom and come back. Seeing that there were still 7 minutes left in the countdown, Li Qingyuan immediately instructed the siblings in front of him. Without waiting for the two siblings to react, he immediately climbed down the hole. It's difficult to get up and easy to get down, with a drop of less than 3 meters in height, even if you jump directly, there's no problem. Watching Li Qingyuan suddenly disappear in front of him, both Pietro and Wanda forgot their fear and tears, and the two children immediately looked at each other. Pietro, is Brother Jack foolish? Wanda hesitated for a while before whispering to her brother. Maybe, he might have hit his head. Pietro scratched his forehead and said with uncertainty. Even if you really want to go to the bathroom on the 3rd floor is not broken. As for jumping back to the 2nd floor. Without thinking about the two little guys' roast, Li Qingyuan immediately rushed into the bedroom and began to pick up. Although Titanic is a very simple rookie mission, at least it is also my first time crossing the plot, so I naturally need to be fully prepared. First of all, weapons. Although their former parents were Chinese, they stayed in places like Sokovia for over a decade and still had some means of self-protection. 2 Beretta 92 pistols, plus bullets from 4 magazines. Doing business in places like Eastern Europe is not possible without weapons at hand. It's just a pity that the weapons prepared by my parents were not very effective against those thugs. When encountering missiles falling from the sky, they really had no fighting power. However, with these 2 guns, it is enough to deal with the dangers that may be encountered on the ship. Then Li Qingyuan quickly opened the bedroom safe and pulled out a few gold bars from inside. Thank you to my former parents, the second daughter of the Chinese family, for their good habit of saving private money. The safe not only contains a large amount of cash, but also many gold bars. Those dollars brought to the world of Titanic are definitely unusable. After all, the timeline of that storyline world is only 1912, and the versions of paper currency are different. But gold bars are the hard currency of all worlds, and bringing a few can definitely be used to meet any needs at any time. By the way, he put the kitchen fruit knife on his belt and was about to flip through the clutter room to see if there were any lifebuoys or similar items. Although I am 99% certain that I can escape from the ship, who knows if the system will play with me and throw me directly to the moment of sinking. So it is also quite necessary to prepare a lifebuoy in advance. Just before he could open the door to the miscellaneous room, he heard the cold sound of the system start reminding. The preparation time has ended, teleportation will begin in 3 seconds, 3, 2, 1. The originally clear head suddenly began to feel dizzy, as if countless light spots were passing by him in a daze. Li Qingyuan wanted to carefully see what those light spots were, but in an instant, he felt a buzzing sound in his mind. He quickly closed his eyes, knowing that he had never killed a pig before and had at least eaten pork. He knew that the current situation was due to his low strength, which could not withstand the side effects of the so-called chaos of time and space. Therefore, he decided to close his eyes, which would make him feel better. Ding! The host has successfully transmitted, please integrate into the current environment within 10 minutes. The main task will be released in 10 minutes. Upon hearing the voice in his mind, Li Qingyuan opened his eyes. What a smell! Just as he opened his eyes, he had to quickly cover his nose. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Titanic. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Titanic. The narrow cabin has a nauseating odor. Li Qingyuan covered his nose with his hand and began to feel frustrated in his heart. If I had known I had brought a mask, why not bring a bottle of air freshener? This smell is like the sewage pipe in an apartment building suddenly bursting and emitting a nauseating odor after being exposed to the sun. This can definitely be considered a chemical attack, with its own highly toxic special effects. What exactly is this place? The protection time of the system is only 9.5 minutes left, so even if the smell is really spicy, he can only resist and start looking around. This is a small cabin with a total area of less than 10 square meters, without even a window. If it weren't for the dim light bulb above his head still flickering, he would really think it was a coffin. Countless daily necessities were piled up haphazardly around, and the ground was covered with things like straw and cotton wool. And that nauseating stench is emanating from these things. I wouldn't have been directly transported to the garbage dump, would I? Li Qingyuan had the intention to leave this place that was unbearable, but the protection time of the system had not yet arrived, so he could only continue to stay here and endure the stench. Fortunately, when it was transmitted, a brief memory was also given to him, allowing him to understand his current situation. The identity assigned to him by the system is that of a Qing dynasty businessman who is preparing to do business in the United States by boat. In theory, he originally bought a third-class ticket, but because those crew members had a low opinion of people, they directly arranged for him to come to the employee cabin on the bottom floor. There's no way, this is still my Qing dynasty. Chinese people bring a sense of inferiority when going out, and being discriminated against is just a normal operation. This cabin is not as spacious as an ordinary kitchen, but it is filled with 9 Chinese people, and there is not even a breathable window. The environment inside can be imagined. Before coming, he roughly recalled the plot and historical facts about the Titanic, and still remembered that there were indeed 8 Chinese laborers on board at that time. But now there is no one in the cabin, so I think everyone is going to work. In recent years, Chinese people have been discriminated against worldwide, and their situation is no better than that of black slave workers. The tragic situation of Chinese people can be seen from the fact that they were thrown into the warehouse despite being a guest who bought tickets. If you encounter a passionate young man, perhaps you will have to prepare to work hard for the rise of XX. However, as a middle-aged person with a psychological age close to 40, Li Qingyuan thinks it's better to be steady. After all, this is just a storyline world, and besides, with his current strength, he can't make any waves. Let's take a look at what the tasks released by the system are, and then we can get some rewards. System, open my property panel. In just over a dozen minutes since his time traveling, he has experienced the first encounter with Marvel World and the encounter with the Scarlet Witch in Lolita's state. He also activated his personal system and was immediately teleported to the storyline world. In the middle, he was delayed for a while due to searching for supplies, and he was so busy that he didn't even have the time to blink. So it wasn't until now that he had time to carefully examine his attribute panel. Name: Li Qingyuan. Race: Male Earthlings. Strength: 4-5, Agility. 5-5, Physical Fitness. 5-5, Spirit. 8-5, Skill. None. A very concise attribute version, without any messy reviews or comments, indicating that our own system is a very legitimate original product, not those seductive and deceiving people who hang the system name outside. The strength is slightly lower than that of a normal person, but considering that there is still room for development in this body at the age of 18 just now, it can be seen that the predecessor still paid more attention to physical exercise. As for why the spirit is so much higher than that of a normal person, it should be due to the fusion of the soul of the predecessor. Of course, the spiritual power of two people is much stronger than that of one person. It's just that empty skill bar, it really makes people feel a bit speechless. At least I have been struggling in society for more than a decade, how come I haven't even mastered a single skill? I don't know at what point the plot is going on now. With my current identity, it's really a bit difficult to handle. He touched his chin and began to carefully consider. As for the foul odor in the air. After smelling it for a few minutes, he got used to it. After all, life is like that. Take it as it comes. James Cameron's film Titanic, based on historical events, is a true adaptation of the entire film. The main overview of the movie is that the bankrupt noblewoman Ruth and her fiancé A.E., Carl, take a boat to New York to get married, and Jack, the poor boy, also dreams of getting rich and boarded the ship to make a fortune in the United States. During the voyage, the female protagonist Ruth Wenqing fell ill and felt that she was not living the life she wanted. At this moment, Jack, the first male, took advantage of the situation and made Jack, the second male, enjoy wearing a green hat in a confused situation. Of course, in the final stage, the male and female protagonists were separated forever due to the sinking of the ship, which brought tears to many people. The first time he watched this movie, he was only in his teens. At that time, he only felt that the love between the male and female protagonists was touching, but it was later discovered by Lee Ching-yuen as he grew older. Isn't this Nima having the same emotional outlook as Aunt Cheong Yao? What exactly did that heartbreaking second son do wrong? A person sitting in a hat at home comes from the sky, and is also blacked out into a despicable and shameless person who is afraid of life and death. Protection time is up, now start releasing the main quest. Just as he was starting to carefully consider the plot and how to start from somewhere, he suddenly heard the system's prompt sound in his mind. Is it an escape mission or a rescue mission? Main task. The world line has deviated, and the SW-626 iceberg is melting on the way because of the global climate problem. The host should bomb the Titanic cruise ship in the original sea area on the night of the fourth day to restore the world line. Task reward. 1 free attribute point, Junior Bomb Specialization. Task failure. Force entry into the storyline of Godzilla 2. Monster King and face off against Red Lotus Godzilla. A mouthful of old blood choked in his throat and almost suffocated him to death. Lee Ching-yuen carefully observed the main task before, and how is this damn system playing with him? Well done, actually asking me to go bomb the ship. System, isn't this task good? It's easy to make people feel like I'm the villain, right? Because he had his first experience of bargaining, he felt that the sand sculpture system he came with seemed quite easy to talk about. We don't have many requirements, can we change the task to escape? I really can't go soak Ruth. The world line of this plot has been changed, and in order to prevent the entire world from collapsing, the Titanic must be sunk in the original sea area. The system remained unmoved and insisted. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Adults have a large quantity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Adults have a large quantity, I want to withdraw the warehouse. Sir, are you going to lift the warehouse? If you want to lift the second-class cabin, you will need an additional 17 pounds. Peters quickly woke up from his drowsiness and said in a panic. If your boss catches you slacking off during work hours, a scolding is probably inevitable. His task is to handle various issues for third-class passengers, which should be strictly considered as customer service and after-sales service. Yes, I want to lift the warehouse. Lee Ching-yuen said with some sadness and indignation. What kind of task did the damn system assign him? It's almost anti-human. However outrageous it may be, he can only accept it with tears in his eyes. After all, fighting against the Red Lotus Godzilla alone, this task is meant to deceive people no matter how he thinks about it. Not to mention that he is still just an ordinary person, even if his level is elevated to the level of a superhero, encountering the Red Lotus Godzilla is likely to be a cold-hearted master. After all, that thing is a monster that can treat nuclear bombs like sunflower seeds. Unless it can reach the level of being a complete god and destroying monsters, ordinary superheroes can only deliver food. However, before completing the task, the first thing he needs to solve is his accommodation problem. He absolutely doesn't want to stay in the employee cabin on the ground floor, not to mention anything else. The smell alone can suffocate people. Just now, he flipped over 200 pounds of banknotes in the cabin, presumably the initial start-up funds given to him by the system. His current identity is that of a Qing dynasty businessman who is preparing to go to the United States to do business, and carrying a large amount of start-up funds is simply normal. In this era, Britain is undoubtedly the world's hegemon, and the pound is also the most valuable currency in the world. 1 pound can be exchanged for $5, and if converted into gold, it can also be exchanged for more than 1 gram. 200 pounds is definitely not a small amount. In the original plot, the male protagonist Jack wanted to board the ship by winning a ticket while playing cards in the casino, but in reality, a third-class ticket only costs 3 pounds. From this, it can be seen that the male protagonist is definitely a pure loser, with a poor pocket and a jingling sound. There are no more seats left, you should go back. Peters was initially worried about being complained about, but when he saw that the person standing in front of him was actually an Asian, he immediately pulled up. Here is 20 pounds, I think there should be a cabin available. Seeing the despicable expression on the chubby white man in front of him, as an old man who has been struggling in society for over a decade, Li Qingyuan still doesn't know what he thinks. If an ordinary person requests to lift the cabin, this guy probably wouldn't dare to say anything nonsense, but when the other person sees him, they immediately change their tone, mainly because of his skin color. In these days, Britain is still the world hegemon, but am I the Qing dynasty? Forget it, stop talking. Talking too much is like tears. Peters casually picked up 2 10-yuan bills and whistled contentedly. Sir, if you want to upgrade to second class, you will need to pay an additional fee of 17 pounds. Although Li Qingyuan knew that these British people had a dark heart, he never expected this guy to be so dark. If you don't have money, please go back and don't hinder my work here. Peters said happily, holding his arm. What can I do if I just blackmail the other party's money? 20 pounds, almost equivalent to half a year's salary. I didn't expect this yellow-skinned monkey to be so wealthy. But this guy speaks English quite well, isn't he? Generally speaking, these yellow-skinned monkeys don't speak fluently, do they? Peters is not afraid of the other party causing trouble, because on the ship, no matter what the other party says, no one will believe it. A few years from now, Europe may go to another extreme, but in this era, racial discrimination is absolutely politically correct. I'll buy a second-class ticket. Although he wished he could take out a pistol from his pocket and kill the damn chubby man in front of him, after carefully weighing his current situation, Li Qingyuan could only suppress his anger and pulled out 2 10-yuan bills. Don't be angry, don't be angry. Anyway, this chubby guy won't live for a few days. Take it, this is the key, go find it yourself. Peters threw a boat ticket and key directly to him, and then stuffed the 20 pounds into the drawer. Of course, there won't be any change or anything like that. Li Qingyuan, who was feeling depressed, naturally wouldn't get entangled with the other party over the 3 heroes list. Anyway, he just thought it was buying a coffin for the other party. Originally, he was a bit impatient with the tasks assigned to him by the system. Even though he knew that the world was virtual and all the plot characters had nothing to do with him, as a law-abiding citizen for over 30 years, he always felt a bit resistant to those insane tasks. But now, after experiencing all the pointing and pointing along the way, he felt that it was better for the broken ship to sink earlier. Oh my goodness! How can White Star Company allow a lowly person to appear in the upper class? This guy should be Japanese, right? Isn't this kind of person supposed to stay in third class? How can he stay here? The third-class cabin is mostly located below the deck, while the second-class cabin is located above the deck. Therefore, when Li Qingyuan appeared on the deck, the white people standing next to him on the deck to watch the scenery all activated the mocking mode. The so-called gentlemanly demeanor is a question that will only be considered after eating enough. Europeans today and the group of Virgin Mary 100 years later are completely two extreme products. Anyone who sees him along the way will casually say a few words. Who? Unable to bear the feeling of being surrounded by others as rare animals, Li Qingyuan found his cabin. He opened the door and walked directly in, which slightly calmed the sadness and anger in his heart. To be honest, although I used to know when studying history that Chinese people had no social status in Europe and America, what was seen in the book was only a superficial phenomenon, and only by experiencing it firsthand can I truly comprehend it. He took a deep breath and finally calmed down. Don't equate your views with a group of dead people. Lying in the cabin, Li Qingyuan began to contemplate the possibility of completing this task. Sinking the Titanic is not an easy task. When watching a movie, it may seem easy to sink a ship, but in reality, when you are inside such a top luxury cruise ship, you will realize how unrealistic it is. The Titanic is 270 meters long and 30 meters wide, with 9 levels up and down. It can be said that it is completely a mobile fortress. Not to mention that it currently has no heavy firepower. Even if it were given a few grenades, it would not be possible to sink the ship. After all, cruise ships of this tonnage have considered various unexpected situations when they leave the factory, and if they want to dig a hole and sink such a huge object, it can only be said that their thinking is too naive. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. London's First Scum Man. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. London's First Scum Man. The starry sky on the sea is really beautiful. Jack Dawson lay on the bench on the deck, sighing as he looked at the scattered stars in the sky. Britain is now the world's hegemon and also the world's leading environmental polluter. London is known as the foggy city because of the high usage of coal, resulting in a hazy sky. If there were any PM2.5 tests in this era, it is estimated that London's values could directly explode. As a wandering painter, Jack has seen many beautiful scenery, but it is still the first time he has seen such a beautiful starry sky tonight. There is no other way. Although he is boastful, in reality he is just a penniless poor person, with no other advantages except for a handsome face. The main reason why Jack fled from Europe to the United States this time, besides having a dream of becoming rich, was that he owed a lot of promiscuous debts here. It is said that several British people who were labeled by him were preparing to kill him, so Jack had no choice but to flee from his hometown. Speaking of which, those British people really lack any gentlemanly spirit. When I was helping others repair household appliances in France, even if the male owner who was driven home collided with him, he would at most quietly remind him to wear insulated gloves. Who, like those British people, would even shout and kill themselves. Long-term use of household appliances can lead to various minor problems. Helping them repair them for free without charging any fees is like the legendary arrival of the Holy Sun. Those guys just don't know how to be grateful and even disrespect themselves, which is really speechless. If it weren't for being on a cruise ship now, Jack would definitely try his best to get close to that girl. After all, with his experience in repairing household appliances, that kind of silly and sweet aristocratic family is the easiest to deceive. Thinking about his reputation as a Western European silver gun, it was just a mouthful blowing. Unfortunately, that girl appears to be a first-class passenger, while he is only a third-class passenger. The Titanic strictly adheres to the differential treatment between different levels. First-class passengers can go anywhere on the cruise ship at will, but third-class passengers cannot step on the second deck at all. So unless that girl runs down with a brainless mind, they can't even talk to each other. This starry sky is really good. Just as Jack was considering whether he should get up and go below the deck to hook up with some gypsy girl to get through this long journey, a figure suddenly appeared beside him. "Hello, I'm Qingyuan Li. What's your name?" Looking at the slightly stunned male lead, Li Qingyuan smiled and greeted him. After sorting out his thoughts in the cabin, he was ready to complete the task well, but when he was really ready to take action, he found that he had no clue at all. In the original plot, the Titanic sank because it hit an iceberg, and according to various scientific data analysis later on, if it had not happened to damage the main structure of the ship when it hit the iceberg, then the ship might not have sunk. So now he has two main tasks. One is to obtain the structural diagram of the ship and find the structural points of the ship. The second is to check if there are any black market merchants on the ship and find them to buy enough powerful explosives. The Titanic was a flight from Britain to the United States at that time, and there were no security checks. It was absolutely reasonable for some black market merchants to carry firearms and low-power explosives. The construction plan of the ship is easy to find, because this is the maiden voyage of the Titanic, so its chief designer Thomas Andrews is also on board, and he definitely has the construction plan in his hands. As for explosives, the black market merchants on board definitely have them too, but it's unclear how much inventory they actually have. However, although he has analyzed the task very clearly, achieving these 2 points is not an easy task. As the chief designer and also a renowned top talent throughout Europe, Andrews naturally lives in first class. Even if he lives in second class, it is not an ordinary difficulty to get in touch with the other party. After all, with his identity, even if he is willing to spend money to buy first-class tickets, those people probably won't sell them to him. Although black market merchants only look at money and not at people, if there is no one as a mediator, they will definitely be confused if they go down to the bottom to search blindly. So after thinking for half an afternoon, Li Qingyuan decided to look for the destined male lead of this drama, who is the scumbag in front of him named Jack Dawson. "Jack Dawson, Qingyuan Li, are you from Qin dynasty?" The scumbag Jack jumped up from his chair, showing off his extraordinary waist and abdomen skills. First-class and second-class guests can point out Li Qingyuan's appearance, but as a penniless poor boy, Jack has no mood and confidence to roast about an Oriental who seems to be rich. Even though Easterners now belong to lower ethnic groups in Europe, they are just wandering painters who rely on deceiving women's money to make a living. Who has the right to look down on each other? Besides, it is said that wealthy people in the East are very wealthy. If they could deduct some money from the other person's pocket, they might have enough money to go to the United States. "Jack, I think you're a very storytelling person." He reached out and shook hands with the other person, and then Li Qingyuan began his strategic plan. According to the plot, in a while, the female protagonist Ruth will rush down from the first-class cabin due to some trivial matters, and then run to the stern position to prepare to jump into the sea and commit suicide. God knows what that Baifume's brain looks like. A guy like her who was born superior actually wants to commit suicide. What does this make the working masses think? Of course, the more foolish the female protagonist's brain is, the more advantageous her actions will be. If she encounters a smart and capable person, Li Qingyuan has no absolute confidence in being able to deceive them. But before fooling that silly and sweet guy, he needs to get rid of the guy in front of him. Of course, I can be said to be the most storytelling person in the whole of London. Do you want to hear my story? Upon hearing Li Qingyuan's praise of himself, Jack Dawson immediately came to his senses. Normally, he is too lazy to chat with men. After all, with this free time, he can definitely rely on his own face to flirt with two inexperienced girls or a young woman who needs urgent repairs because his husband is always in the room outside. But considering that the Easterner in front of him seemed to be very wealthy, Jack decided to reluctantly argue with him for a while. "No need, but Jack, I have something I want to talk to you about." Of course, Li Qingyuan has nothing to talk to this scumbag about, he just wants to get rid of him. "Jack, I am a businessman who wants to buy some prohibited items, but because I am from the East, others don't even sell me. Do you know where there is a black market? As a scumbag, building good relationships with others can be said to be Jack's survival rule, so he can definitely find the black market on the ship. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. How to Handle Wenqing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 How to Handle Wenqing. Sending Jack a £5 reward to help him find a black market businessman. Li Qingyuan finally lay comfortably on the bench where Jack was just now, looking up at the starry sky. Just now, Jack's expression was clearly mistaken for him as a scapegoat. £5 is enough for the other party to spend more than a month in London, and now they only need to help contact the businessman to get so much money. It is obvious that in Jack's heart, Li Qingyuan must have been equated with foolish money. But if that unlucky child knew that he had lost his biggest chance in his life for just £5, he would definitely regret it. As for saying that although he lost love, he gained life. Don't be funny. Without Ruth as a springboard, Jack would have been just a poor girl in the third-class cabin until he died. When the cruise ship sank, he would definitely have been buried in the sea with the ship. After all, third class has no human rights. After about 10 minutes, as he was counting the stars, he heard a rapid sound of footsteps. Okay, the female lead is here. Li Qingyuan followed behind and watched as the woman in a red low-cut evening gown rushed to the back of the deck in one breath, trembling with both hands on the railing. Of course it's trembling. This girl is wearing an evening gown, probably full of vacuum inside. The current temperature in the North Atlantic is below 10 degrees, so it's cheap if she doesn't freeze to death. Ruth was just attending a dinner party with others in the first-class banquet hall, but halfway through, she couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed. Every day is a boring gathering and dinner, and she has to wear a well-behaved mask to greet people with a smiling face. This oppressive life has almost made her collapse. Ruth DeWitt Bouquet, the only legitimate heir of the Bouquet family, was a count personally conferred by Her Majesty the Queen of Great Britain, and also served as the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives. When old Bouquet was still alive, their family was considered a prestigious family, but when old Bouquet passed away due to tuberculosis, the Bouquet family fell instantly. There's no way, neither Ruth nor her mother is a naive young lady. Both of them are the kind of masters who only know how to spend money without making money, especially since their spending speed is not as fast as usual. So the inheritance left by old Bouquet was quickly spent, and Ruth DeWitt Bouquet, who felt like he was about to become poor, who was Miss Ruth's mother, immediately came up with a good idea. Although the Bouquet family has turned into yesterday's golden age due to the passing of the old Bouquet, some people still see the Bouquet family as a high-quality asset. Even in 100 years, those nouveau riche will tirelessly find themselves a famous ancestor, let alone now. The Bouquet family is a count certified by the Queen, and Miss Ruth Bouquet is as beautiful as a flower, and also the first heir to the title. For those emerging billionaires, although they have plenty of money, it does not hinder their desire to add a noble title to their family. So after 1,000 choices, Mrs. Ruth Bouquet finally found a perfect home for her daughter. Carl Hockley, a handsome millionaire from the United States, is a steel tycoon with over a dozen steel factories. These days, millionaires are truly top-tier wealthy people, and they are not at all the same dimensional creatures as those millionaires in later generations. Carl Hockley fully meets the standards of all diamond kings, young and charming, definitely the type of woman who can't close her legs when she sees him. In everyone's eyes, Ruth and Carl can both be considered a perfect match, with a perfect balance of wealth and beauty. But in Ruth's personal feelings, she seemed like a marionette, controlled by her mother to choose her own life. Especially as the president of the Hockley Group, Carl's style naturally carries a hint of a domineering CEO. This style may make young girls in 100 years crazy, but for Miss Ruth, she feels that the other party does not respect her at all. In Ruth's impression, Carl was just a big shot, willing to marry him only for the sake of his noble title. So when the two of them had a dispute over some trivial matters, Ruth immediately used the excuse of going to the bathroom and ran out of the first-class cabin. Actually, she didn't know why she had to run out, but people always have moments when they suddenly feel dizzy. She held on to the railing at the stern of the ship, unsure of where she should go. After staring for about 10 minutes, Li Qingyuan finally confirmed that the young lady had no intention of jumping into the sea. I think so. As a top-tier wealthy and beautiful woman in London, even if Ruth is extremely dissatisfied with her current life, she would never think of suicide just because of such a small matter. The main reason why she almost fell into the sea in the plot is because there is a talkative male lead instigating her. In fact, people who jump into the sea and buildings are the same. If she were the only one, she would take the initiative to leave at most for more than 10 minutes, after all, not everyone has the courage to die. If there are onlookers nearby, while they are still talking nonsense, it will give the person preparing to jump a strange illusion, as if encouraging them to jump. Because Jack, the troublemaker, had already been sent to the cabin to look for merchants, there was no one to hold Ruth and talk nonsense now. And after being blown by the cold wind for 10 minutes, the young lady's hot-blooded head slowly cooled down. What are you talking about, seawater? It is an eternal question. What is your answer, sky? It is an eternal silence. Just as Ruth was pondering whether it would be embarrassing to go back in such a gloomy state, she only heard a burst of poetry coming from behind. As a severe case of Wenqing disease, Ruth has the least resistance to so-called artists, as can be seen from being deceived by that clumsy wandering painter into not being able to find north in just a few days. Of course, although Miss Ruth has various silly and sweet talents, at least one thing is that she still has great expertise in art appreciation. So upon hearing this poem, Ruth instantly forgot her purpose of running out and began to look at the past along the source of the sound. Excuse me, did you write that poem just now? Ruth adjusted her slightly messy dress and walked lightly behind Li Qingyuan, whispering. May I ask who you are? Upon hearing Ruth's voice, Li Qingyuan made a victory gesture in his heart and slowly turned around. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Export into Poetry. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Export into Poetry. It has to be said that using life experiences that Ruth has never encountered before to impress the male lead can definitely stir up an inexperienced girl's heart, but the consequence of doing so is to betray the entire aristocratic class. Indeed, the Ruth in front of me is very big, not right, it's very white, not right. Forget it, let's not talk about it. Anyway, that's what it means. Li Qingyuan forced himself to raise his gaze slightly and aimed it at Ruth's face. This woman was definitely intentional. She even dressed up like this and jumped into the sea. I don't know what she really thought. At the age of 18, Winslet is definitely at the peak of her appearance, completely at opposite extremes to the round spherical object she will have in the future. Now Winslet, no, it's Ruth. Ruth's physique is the kind of chubby figure that men think of, as the saying goes, fat should be thin, thin should be thin. This figure, which could definitely be called a peerless beauty in the Tang dynasty, coupled with an almost **** evening gown, is really difficult to concentrate on. Fortunately, as a middle-aged and elderly male with a psychological age close to 40, Li Qingyuan has now passed the age of blood and vitality, using great perseverance to control himself and trying to pretend to be nothing serious. I just looked at the starry sky and was moved by this poem. I didn't expect to meet such a beautiful lady at such a time. Nice to meet you, Ruth DeWitt Bucket. Compared to other people's discrimination against Easterners, Ruth, this silly and sweet person, doesn't have that kind of concept. Instead, she happily extends her hand and introduces herself to Li Qingyuan. After all, in her understanding, any artist who can write such a beautiful poem is worthy of admiration and admiration. Qingyuan Li, Miss Ruth, I'm glad to meet you too. Holding Ruth's fair little hand, Li Qingyuan showed a harmless smile. The two of them quickly started chatting about the so-called art of poetry, although he said that those poems written by Westerners can also be called poetry. But it didn't hinder him from using it to deceive the silly and sweet little girl in front of him. At least he is also a legendary street writer, and naturally knows the things in these words like his fingertips. When encountering those literary masters, he may appear vulnerable, but it is more than enough to deceive a noble young lady like Ruth. Life is as brilliant as summer flowers, death as serene as autumn leaves. Ruth murmured the 2 lines of poetry she had just asked from Li Qingyuan, feeling like she was almost wet. Surprisingly, she was able to write such touching language. The poet from the Qing dynasty in front of her immediately made her feel like she wanted to meet before getting married. There's no way, Wenqing girls, especially those like Ruth who haven't been beaten by society, always hold many unrealistic fantasies. If Li Qingyuan's mission in this world is to capture Ruth, then he can now declare the mission completed. Unfortunately, his task was so insane that he could only push Ruth away from him with a sense of regret, keeping a slight distance between the two. There's no other way, he still needs this silly by Tian and her fiancé-es network to clear his relationship, so he can only endure the pain and cut off his love, turning away the beautiful meat that was delivered to his door. Miss Ruth, who was pushed away, suddenly realized how frivolous her behavior had been earlier. Although as a British person, she did not attach as much importance to matters between men and women as Easterners did, she had just met each other, so doing so was indeed a bit presumptuous. Well, I just wanted to discuss poetry culture with you. Ruth decided to salvage some points for her audacious behavior, at least not to let the distant Eastern poet in front of her treat her as a frivolous and promiscuous woman. Miss Ruth, your understanding of poetry makes me admire it. As a knowledgeable woman like you, I can't think of a second one in the whole of London. Indeed, in order to complete the task smoothly, he couldn't just whip his horse now. But if he could say a few good words without spending money, maybe he would want to use her for a change after completing the task in a few days. The awkward atmosphere between the two was suddenly swept away, and they sat down together on the bench to study the so-called poetry. Mr. Qingyuan, I've found the person you're looking for. Gasping for breath, Jack ran up from under the deck. Just now, he used his strengths and learned from the gypsy girl about the position of the black market merchant on the ship. He immediately rushed back at a speed of 100 meters, ready to find the unjust leader to get a reward. You should know that the total area of the Titanic is close to an ordinary town, and Jack's ability to find his mission goal in a really short time can only be said to be the son of luck in the plot. But when he saw Ruth sitting side by side with Li Qingyuan, he suddenly felt as if something important in life had been taken away. Hello, beautiful lady. My name is Jack Dawson, nice to meet you. Jack quickly sorted out his disheveled appearance from running, and then approached Ruth with the most perfect smile. Ruth lifted her head and lightly tapped. Her mind was now filled with the verses that Li Qingyuan had just said to her. If it weren't for her years of good upbringing, she wouldn't even want to pay attention to this suddenly popping up guy. I am. Jack saw that Ruth was quite indifferent to him and quickly raised his voice, ready to start his girl-picking mode. Of course, this girl seems to have a fiancé, and by the way, she is also a first-class lady, and by the way, she seems to have a good impression of her new employer. But what's the problem with this? He is Jack, a silver gun, and a professional in repairing household appliances for 30 years. Dawson, how could he give up his goal just because of such a small difficulty? Jack, what sentence do you think is the most thought-provoking in Shelley's Ode to the West Wind? Li Qingyuan asked calmly when he saw Jack, a bastard, wanting to pry into a corner in front of him. Ah. Shelley. The West Wind from the Snow. Jack Tun hesitated as he learned a decent sketching technique through his talent. With that skill, he pretended to be a wandering painter outside all day long, and was indeed able to seduce many ignorant girls. But what did you tell him about Shelley and Byron? Do you think he seems to have money to go to school? If I were a fallen leaf drifting with you, if I were a flowing cloud flying with you. Although Jack didn't know, Ruth, as a cultured young girl, immediately answered. I love these two lines of Shelley's poetry the most, they are simply the sweetest interpretation of love. Looking at the two guys who were spouting strange words, Jack felt that his outlook on life had been criticized. Can even that nonsensical statement be called poetry? End of this chapter. Chapter 9. The World's Most Rich Person. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. The World's Most Rich Person, Ruth. After chatting with Miss Silly White Sweet for about half an hour, Lee Ching-yuen finally found the protagonist in the original plot, Rose's fiancé Carl. Carl was originally chatting well with others in the banquet hall, but when he turned around, he realized that his fiancée had gone somewhere. Carl, who suddenly felt a green light flashing in his forehead, rushed out with his bodyguard. He knew that his fiancée seemed to have some abnormal brain, and God knew if she would suddenly have a hot head and do something strange. Fortunately, when Carl found Ruth, he found her neatly dressed and chatting with others. If a man and a woman sit together chatting at night, it may still feel a bit ambiguous, but if it's two men and one woman, then there shouldn't be anything wrong. That's also why Lee Ching-yuen didn't drive away the broken light bulb next to him. Jack, this kid can not only be used as a background board, but also as a personal ID for himself. Otherwise, just rely on Ruth's fiery gaze at her, who knows if the other person has any evil thoughts. Never underestimate the enthusiasm of a brainless fan, they are simply a group of irrational people. Carl. This is the great poet from the distant east, Mr. Lee Ching-yuen. Ruth excitedly introduced herself to her fiancé. Hello, should I address you Mr. Lee? As a millionaire, Carl Hockley's knowledge is much higher than his silly fiancée and poor boy Jack's. At the very least, he knows how to accurately address others. Is Mr. Hockley the president of Hockley Group? Lee Ching-yuen shook hands with the Green Hat King in the original work and asked as he spoke. Yes, is Mr. Lee also interested in the steel industry? Carl frowned slightly. Although he was somewhat dissatisfied with the sudden appearance of two men next to Ruth, he could only suppress his displeasure due to his fiancée's face. In fact, besides being a poet, I have another important role as a staff member of Prince Ching. Prince Ching wants to find a partner for himself in the United States, and I don't know if Mr. Hockley is interested, Lee Ching-yuen said, ignoring the contempt in Carl's eyes. Prince Ching. Prince Ching of the Qing dynasty. Originally, Carl still had some contempt for Lee Ching-yuen, because for him, a tycoon in the top class of Europe and America, disdaining Easterners was completely politically correct. But when Lee Ching-yuen shared his intentions, his eyes lit up and he excitedly grabbed the other person's hands. There's no way, businessmen pursue profits. As the chairman of the Hockley Group, Carl can't be like Ruth, who is always focused on romance. Prince Ching Yi-kwang, this fame may not have been heard of by many people, but in reality, this guy is truly famous in this era. This old man is even more famous in Europe and America than the Empress Dowager, because many people don't care about the names of those in power in the Middle East or Africa, but most people still have some understanding of people who are closely related to them. Yi-kwang has a great reputation in Europe and America, mainly because he is wealthy. The Qingji company established by this old man sells all official positions in the Qing dynasty at clear prices, from 6 ministers to ambassadors and county officials, all of which are paid on delivery without any credit. Even Yuan Shikai spent 3 million taels of silver to buy an official from the other party. One can imagine how ruthless this old thing is. Moreover, Yi-kwang's money is never kept in China. All of his money has been exchanged for pounds and dollars, which are stored in various banks around the world. He is definitely the first person in China to diversify investment and become a naked official. Refusing to provide complete statistics, HSBC Bank alone in the UK has saved no less than £7 million. You should know that even building the Titanic cost only £1.5 million, while building the world's top dreadnought warship only requires £2.5 million. It can be said that the current Prince Ching, Yi-kwang, is undoubtedly the richest man in the world. Although Carl Hockley can also be considered a millionaire, compared to Prince Qing, he is just a younger brother. For capitalists, they only look at the amount of money and will not be neglected just because the other party is from the East. Is it important to have money, regardless of race, skin color, social status these days? Li Qingyuan knew that if he wanted to sneak into first class, there was no hope of relying on Ruth, a playboy. In the original plot, the chubby woman Molly Bronkin invested in Jack because she was a handsome white guy. Who knows if that woman had any strange ideas? But if you want to get along with these upper-class people, relying solely on Ruth is absolutely useless. The key is still to rely on those who truly hold power. It's like the group of people sitting next to him now. Prince Qing's position as a staff member was more useful than anything else. In just half an hour, the people around him had transformed from Ruth, a playboy, to several directors of large companies. As the saying goes, parents are not as good as money. Rich people, no matter where they are, will definitely be regarded as ancestors and confessed. The current situation of Qinghua is not very good. For those low-level tourists, they may not even have heard of the term Qinghua, but for everyone sitting in this private room, their vision is much higher than that of third-class cabins. In recent years, high-ranking officials from the Qing dynasty have been constantly transferring assets to the UK, but super big bosses like Prince Qing have never been encountered before. After all, that old guy has a good mind. Whether it's Yuan Datu or Sun Datsao, he owes him a lot of favors, so even though the emperor changed several terms later, he still managed to end up well. However, not even many people within the Qing dynasty know about this matter, let alone these British people who are far away from the other end of the earth. It's not that no one has doubted Li Qingyuan's identity, but nowadays it's not much easier to find a Chinese person who is fully familiar with the international situation and the internal environment of the Qing dynasty, and also knows astronomy, geography, and English. It's just like catching an alien. In addition, with the recommendation of Carl Hockley, it only took half a day for Li Qingyuan to successfully penetrate the enemy's interior, becoming a first-class VIP and also becoming a fat sheep in the eyes of countless merchants. That's Prince Qing, who claims to have millions of assets and wealth that can rival his country. Even if the other party only leaks a little bit from their fingers, it's enough for him to eat for several lifetimes. Moreover, at least Li Qingyuan has been a street fighting writer for more than a decade and knows some general economic concepts. Although it is impossible for him to make a detailed plan, it is more than enough to impersonate an expert and casually point out a few words. So by the next morning, he had become a hot topic on the entire ship, and invitations to visit had already been scheduled for 2 months. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Chemical Formulas. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Chemical Formulas. Mr. Li, this is what you want. Jack put the purchased item on the desk with a curious expression, not knowing why this adult from the mysterious East bought so many medicines. Thank you very much, Ruth. Could you please help me pay for Mr. Jack's goods? Li Qingyuan nodded slightly and instructed Ruth to settle the bill for the other party. Heaven and earth have a conscience. He really doesn't have any ulterior motives towards this female lead, because the system task has nothing to do with her, and he doesn't want to make any unnecessary mistakes. However, it was obvious that he had underestimated the combat effectiveness of the brainless fan. After learning that Li Qingyuan was alone, Miss Ruth insisted on relying on her identity advantage to come to him as the financial manager. In her original words, how could Mr. Li sail across the sea and travel thousands of miles without anyone to help him? Carl almost turned pale with anger over this matter, but he couldn't even say anything about Ruth, especially when Li Qingyuan said he only knew how to make Ruth his secretary and would only help him during the day. It was only then that Carl breathed a sigh of relief. As for whether he can truly understand the true purpose of a secretary, it is unknown. A total of £32. Jack quoted 3 times the purchase price without hesitation. At the beginning, he really had a good impression of the little girl in front of him, as if he had been suddenly shot in the heart by Cupid. But after several encounters, Jack realized that he couldn't keep up with the other person's brain circuits. Ruth's mind was now filled with the poems taught by Li Qingyuan, completely ignoring Jack's flattering actions. So after experiencing 2 failed performances, Jack completely let himself go. Anyway, there were countless gypsy girls in the third-class cabin of the entire Titanic, and his handsome face didn't require much effort. Why did he have to hang himself from a tree he didn't need? Besides, his most important task now is to make money. As long as he has money, he can become a millionaire himself. Will he still want to play that game? Here's 30.2 yuan. Ruth took out the money from her own wallet and handed it to Jack, who laughed so hard that her teeth began to reflect. Sir, is there anything else I can help with? Jack stuffed the banknote, emitting an ink aroma, into his pocket and asked with a hint of flattery. I only managed to earn 20 pounds by running errands for a day, and this kind of business is like a drop in the sky. I don't have it for now. If there's anything, I'll come to you again. Li Qingyuan waved his hand directly, as he no longer needed this destined male lead. What he is currently racking his brain to do is how to reduce the formula for nitroglycerin. As a street fighting writer, one must have a certain understanding of various knowledge such as cement manufacturing, glass casting, gunpowder composition, hybrid rice, and so on. After all, these skills are essential for the protagonist to become rich and prosperous, regardless of whether they are traveling through different worlds or ancient times. But it's easy to say and difficult to sit down, just like the simplest black powder. Everyone knows the proportion of 1 carbon, 2 nitrate, and 3 sulfur, but it's probably difficult to truly achieve without hundreds of experiments. Moreover, with the size of the Titanic, it was somewhat difficult for black powder to solidify it, so he had to choose the more powerful yellow powder. That's the yellow powder invented by the alchemist Nobel. The medicine he asked Jack to buy is all for treating angina, and the basic ingredient of these things is nitroglycerin. With just a little filtration, extremely pure nitroglycerin can be obtained. Then simply pour a little egg white, rust, and fine sand into nitroglycerin, stir well, and add plant ash to air dry, to obtain a terrifying yellow gunpowder. This kind of small skill can be obtained on the internet with a heart in the 21st century, but in today's era, it is a secret that major laboratories do not spread. Therefore, he is not afraid of being discovered because even if others see it, they do not know what he is actually doing. As for the formulas and data written in the diary, if a chemist proficient in Chinese could be found on the Titanic, then it could only be said that the system maliciously increased the difficulty. At first, he wanted to buy explosives directly from the black market, but after learning about the situation on the black market, he had to give up that plan. Undoubtedly, as black market merchants, they don't care what is prohibited or not. Those merchants do indeed have explosives in their hands, but they are only scattered black powder particles, and the amount is unbelievably small. Li Qingyuan suspected that even if he collected all the explosives from the black market on the entire ship, it was difficult to say whether he could hold a fireworks show. Using those black gunpowder, I hope it can burn a hole in the bottom of the Titanic. You should know that for a giant cruise ship like the Titanic, the bottom steel plate alone is 5 centimeters thick, and with various interlayers, the thickness of the bottom plate is estimated to exceed half a foot. Even the yellow gunpowder in his hand is probably just a big hole. A hole of 2 or 3 square meters may be a fatal threat to small ships, but it has no impact on the Titanic at all. During the construction of this ship, water seepage was taken into consideration, so 20 sealed compartments were specially designed. Even if 4 of them were leaking, the other 16 sealed compartments could ensure the safety of the entire ship. In the original plot, the reason why it sank was mainly because the iceberg suddenly broke through 5 sealed compartments, and the rear of the ship was flooded too much, causing the entire ship to be lifted and then break from the middle. Thinking of this, Li Qingyuan suddenly felt a bit helpless, reaching out his palm and scratching his forehead. How could he think about this task? It feels unreliable. The explosives in your own hands can be used to blow up Zhaoyang compartments. If they are scattered to 5 compartments, they may not even break the steel plates. As for collecting more materials to make explosives, not to mention whether there are so many raw materials on the ship, even he himself cannot get busy. Making explosives is not about moving bricks. You need to find someone to handle it. It's estimated that before you leave, the other party has already blown up the cabin. The alchemist Nobel also created the yellow explosive after sacrificing his entire family back then. Qingyuan, did you think of any wonderful poetry? Seeing Li Qingyuan's scratching expression, Ruth immediately felt that he had such a good temperament, even his thoughtful appearance was so handsome. There is no way, when a person is crazily infatuated, even if you defecate, they will feel that your strength is completely different from others. Ruth walked gently behind Li Qingyuan and then approached him gently. Mr. Li, Carl Hockley pushed the door open and saw a scene that made his forehead sparkle with green light. End of this chapter.